The epic hero Beowulf is often referred to in translations as a prince, but this is somewhat inaccurate, as the character is meant to be Scandinavian, and early Scandinavian kingship was passed down through election or competition, rather than through genealogical lineage. However, the poem itself is English in origin, and the English kings followed primogeniture, the act of passing down kingship from father to son. A case can be made that the author of Beowulf, living under a system of primogeniture, either consciously or unconsciously wrote in sequences that support genealogical kingship. This can be seen, for instance, in the end of the book, where it is implied that the Geats are doomed because Beowulf did not leave a biological heir to his throne.
So for the purposes of this video, Batman Beyond is Beowulf. Justice League Unlimited was the last entry into what is called the DC Animated Universe, and it ran from 2004 to 2006. And I never watched it because it only aired on Cartoon Network, and I didn't have cable until around 2009. But when I was in like the height of my Batman Beyond fandom involvement around like 2011, 2012-ish, someone told me that I had to watch the Batman Beyond Unlimited episode Epilogue, saying that it would answer all of my questions about Batman Beyond, to which I sort of responded, what questions? The series was pretty well self-contained, and I didn't feel like it really left any big hanging issues other than just, you know, what happens next for Terry. But I watched it anyways, and whew, boy, do I have a bone to pick with this episode. So let's start with a brief overview. So about 15-ish years after the events of the Batman Beyond series, Terry McGinnis breaks into the home of Amanda Waller. And I'm going to admit, I did not know anything about her going into the episode. I still don't really know anything about her because I still haven't watched Justice League Unlimited, and I have zero interest in Suicide Squad. But he breaks into her house, and he's angry and pissed off and demanding answers, as Terry tends to do. And as he's having this conversation with Amanda Waller, we get interspersed flashbacks to, I guess, just earlier in the day when Terry is shouting at Bruce, breaking up with Dana, and quitting the Justice League. So, you know, an average life in the day of Terry McGinnis. There is also a flashback to Bruce's days in the Justice League as he is fighting the Royal Flush Gang, and particularly dealing with a little girl who goes by Ace. And it's a nice little scene. It really helps showcase Bruce's compassion, but it doesn't really contribute much to the narrative. It kind of just feels like they were trying to pad runtime. So going back to Terry and Amanda, we find out that Terry donated a kidney to Bruce when Bruce's kidneys failed, and he was such a good genetic match that it got the wheels sort of turning in his head, and he did a DNA test on himself, and he found out that he is Bruce's biological son. Bruce denies having anything to do with this. He is adamant that he never slept with Terry's mom. Hey, no. We find out that it was Amanda Waller who was responsible for this, in that she collected Bruce's DNA, injected it into Warren McGinnis, and then organized a hit, like took out a hit on the McGinnises. She took out a hit on the McGinnises, and fortunately the assassin that she hired did not follow through with the plan, but the intention was that Terry would lose his family in a way similar to Bruce did at a similar age. Therefore, because he is related to Bruce and he has the same trauma, he would then become Batman. There's a lot to unpack here. We're going to start with my petty little nitpicks that I, as a longtime Batman Beyond fanboy, was angry about. First, the Justice League opening is really boring. I don't know how they went from the Batman the Animated Series opening, which is iconic, to the Batman Beyond opening, which was fresh and edgy and cool, to silhouettes standing around with generic music playing over it. Did they just run out of budget? I don't know, but it's boring and I don't like it. Next nitpick, Amanda Waller calls Terry good looking.
Why is it that superheroes are always so good looking?
And Terry in Batman Beyond is good looking. Definitely. Like, he's very good looking in Batman Beyond. But in Epilogue, he has a mullet. He has a mullet. And he became beefy in an unattractive way. Don't get me wrong, I like beef. I am a thirsty little twink, and I like beef. But this just doesn't look good on Terry. It's not a good look. Someone should have stopped him from getting that haircut. If he didn't have the haircut, it might work, but not with that haircut. Nitpick number 3. The Royal Flush Gang is really inconsistent with its portrayal in Batman Beyond. In that, in Batman Beyond, it was a dynasty, a family that passed along the roles of the Royal Flush Gang. But in Epilogue, it's just like random people sometimes pick up the title of the Royal Flush Gang and just like recreate it without being related to any of it. And that's just inconsistent with what it was in Batman Beyond, which is really weird because in Batman Beyond, like, the family aspect of the Royal Flush Gang was a huge source of conflict in multiple episodes and like a point of like one of Terry's love interests. Petty nitpicks out of the way, let's talk about the meat and potatoes problems with this episode. So let's start with the most basic, which is the bad science. How exactly does Bruce's DNA being injected into Warren McGinnis's bloodstream change Warren McGinnis's sperm? That is not how a blood transfusion works. It would make more sense if Amanda Waller had somehow gotten a hold of Bruce's sperm and Warren and Mary were trying to conceive via in vitro fertilization, but I guess either they didn't want to or weren't allowed to go there in a children's show. So it's weird, confusing, bad science. But science is whatever. This is sci-fi. Let's suspend our suspension of disbelief. There is another bigger problem, which is that Amanda Waller says that she picked the McGinnises to be the next Batman family because Warren and Mary McGinnis had the same psychological profile as the Waynes. How? In what world would they have the exact same psychological profile? The Waynes are uber wealthy, old money, like, family who own a mega corporation. Meanwhile, the McGinnises are a pair of working class people whose marriage is kind of like rocky. Not to mention the fact that within the timeline of Batman Beyond, the Waynes would be like baby boomers and the McGinnises would probably be Gen Z. My parents are baby boomers and I work with Gen Z. There is no way that they have the same psychological profile. Just the fact that Gen Z grew up in this like pointless war in the Middle East that has not ended because of the shadow of 9/11, that alone has created this very different psychological profile. Now, No, wait, I was going to say they couldn't predict 9/11, but this was made in 2004, so it was post 9/11. That was a huge, like, watershed for American culture. Like, come on. But basically what I'm trying to get at is, like, billionaires can't even conceive of what basic food costs.
Price-a-roni would be within $1.
$5.
Okay.
And yet we're expected to believe that the Waynes have the exact same psychological profile as the McGinnises. That doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. But again, somehow let's just assume that these two couples, even though they come from different generations, they have hugely different socioeconomic status. Let's assume that somehow they have the exact same... Oh, fuck. Okay, but like the bad science, let's suspend our disbelief. Let's assume that somehow these two families from hugely different socioeconomic statuses and different generations somehow do have the exact same psychological profile. Again, we still haven't gotten into the truly biggest issue that I have with this episode, and that is, why would losing his parents at the same age as Bruce prime Terry for becoming Batman? Bruce's journey from orphan to Batman makes sense in the context that he is uber wealthy, and he has the capital and the resources and the time to dedicate to traveling the world, learning from the greatest people to become the world's best detective and martial artist. Terry doesn't have that advantage. Why would he become Batman just because he lost his family? People lose their families every day, and they don't become a superhero because they don't have that exact same drive that Bruce did, and they don't have the resources to back it up. But the point is that Bruce goes about being a superhero in the way that a rich person would, in that he spends his time beating up poor people. And why would a kid from a working class background have the same reaction to witnessing a crime? In fact, that's kind of the point of Batman Beyond, in that Terry doesn't have that same reaction. He doesn't just go and beat up poor people, and that's because of how he loses his father, Warren McGinnis. Warren McGinnis is killed by a wealthy businessman. And in fact, there is some lip service paid to Warren McGinnis in the episode Epilogue, where Amanda Waller talks about the fact that Terry's father was murdered anyways, even after her assassin decided not to kill him. To which the point is, like, what's even the point of this, like backstory that that Terry is actually Bruce's biological son? What's the point of that if he's going to lose his father anyways? And I really hate this bit because it ruins a lot of Terry's motivation. In the first episode of Batman Beyond, in Rebirth, Terry decides to become Batman not just to punish crime, but to punish a specific type of crime, a corrupt system. He is trying to, like, attack a broader part of, like, the injustice in the world instead of just, like, petty criminals. He's actually trying to make a wider difference. And then later in Return of the Joker, we find out that Terry McGinnis isn't even fighting for that. He is fighting because he wants to prove to himself that he's a worthwhile person. And I did a video on Return of the Joker and the message of Return of the Joker. Go watch it. Well, the message of Return of the Joker is that Terry is a good person even without having to be Batman. The message of Epilogue is that Batman is some sort of genetic condition, and that Terry is destined to become Batman. That his desire to better himself or to avenge his father means nothing because he would have become Batman anyways. This is where we start to tie this back to Beowulf. The reason why Batman is pretty much the most popular superhero in the world is because he is a normal guy. Anyone has the potential to become Batman if they have the time and the resources, or they're willing to put in the time and the resources. Not everyone can be Batman, but everyone has the potential to become Batman. It's kind of like a Ratatouille. You know, not everyone can become a great chef, but a great chef can come from anywhere, sort of thing. Mikey Newman did a really good video about how anyone can be Batman, and you should definitely go and check that out. But the point of Batman is that, unlike Superman or Wonder Woman or any of the other, like, big-name superheroes, he was not born with a physical advantage. Yes, he has mountains and mountains of money, but he was not born into a genetic, like, advantage over anyone else. But then along comes Epilogue, and it states that being Batman is a genetic condition, that it's a genealogical lineage, that if you are related to Batman, you will become Batman, that it is in your blood. And that's already kind of a weird message to send, considering that part of Batman's big, like, thing is that he adopts orphans and turns them into superheroes. And, like, they have just as much of a reason to become Batman as he does, because they have the exact same training as he does. They lost their parents at the same age as he did, but they wind up not becoming Batman because, as I said in my video about why people don't like Batman Beyond, Bruce is a, like, sad, bitter old man who alienates everybody around him. But the point is that Batman is a story about a man who becomes a superhero through his own merits. And Batman Beyond reinforced that idea by saying that the next Batman would be the last person that you would expect to become Batman. That Terry McGinnis is working class, he doesn't have money, he's not super smart, he doesn't really apply himself, and he was a juvenile delinquent. But through hard work and determination, he does become the next Batman. Like Beowulf. Beowulf is someone who becomes a king through his own merits. But at the end of his story, he dies, and he doesn't leave an heir. He gives the kingship to his kinsman Wiglaf, but it's very clear that Wiglaf is not ready to become king, that he does not have all the specialness that Beowulf has, and that he will not be able to protect the Geats from destruction. Like Beowulf, with its, like, underlying message by someone who believed in primogeniture, that primogeniture is the way to go, even in cases where meritocracy is part of the culture. Justice League Unlimited's epilogue implies that you have to be born into greatness, that you cannot make yourself great. Without Beowulf, the Geats fail, and without Bruce Wayne's lineage, the world will fail. And that's just not a very uplifting message for all of us regular Joes.